The metaverse is emerging as the next big technology platform and promises to be the next frontier for human experiences on the internet. Into the Metaverse covers companies, technologies, and trends that are bringing these promises to life. Join creator and host Jonathan Ross-Friedman, founder and CEO of Supersocial, as he interviews the brilliant minds that are building, shaping, and investing in the Metaverse.
Welcome to Into the Metaverse. I'm Jan, and joining me today is Matias Rodriguez, SVP of Technology, Games and Metaverse Studios at Globant, which is a global IT software development company operating since 2003. As SVP of Technology at Globant's Metaverse and Gaming Studios, Matías leads a worldwide multidisciplinary team of more than 1,500 people to build products for clients. For the Metaverse Studio, he's leading the journey of helping companies create and operate new virtual spaces where they can extend their brand presence. Matías, super delighted to have you on the podcast.
Hello, John. Nice to meet you. Super happy to be here, for sure.
Let's dig in. So, Matías, let's start with your role. What does it mean to lead games and Metaverse Studios at a company like Globant?
Sure, absolutely. So at Globant, we organize our expertise in what we call studios, which you can imagine are like pockets of expertise. Originally, I joined Globant to help on the gaming studio. So over the past 15 years, we have been building games for a lot of AAA and mobile companies. And then it was a natural evolution to start working on different industries. And as soon as we saw the trend about the metaverse, we decided to spawn a dedicated studio to focus on that. And basically what it means is we build the teams that works side by side with our main partners to co-create, co-design, and co-develop and maintain all these big metaverses. And some of the more successful metaverses right now used to be games. So it was a natural evolution for us to start helping. So we essentially like to set up the teams, work side by side with our partners and help them tackle this new space for them that it could be very challenging and very new for specific industries.
So before we dig in further on the type of project you guys are doing and the type of companies you work with, that whatever you can share publicly, I'd love to take a step back and actually ask you, how do you guys, you personally and maybe Globant overall, define the metaverse?
Sure, absolutely. So for us, the metaverse is essentially a new space, a new canvas. Depending on the industry and the company, that means different things, but it's essentially a new space for companies to talk in a very innovative way to both their consumers and as their employees as well. So being a new space, it happens with Web 2 and Web 1, even with mobile. It's a kind of a new revolution. It's a new space. It has their own ergonomics, their own dynamics, their own particularities. And for us, it's very important to help our partners and our clients tackle this new space that has some roots and some similarities to games. That's where I think that we were very lucky to have a lot of organic knowledge. But essentially, for us, it's very simple. It's a new space for companies. They need to reinvent their presence on that space, whether that could mean their processes, either internal, public processes. That means, again, products, services. It's basically a new approach to discuss and to talk with both your consumers and your employees.
Fantastic. So now that we've put that overview in place, what are some of the case studies or success stories you're able to share from what Globant has done until today in the space with brands or enterprises?
Absolutely. So from what I can share and what is publicly available, we have been working with a lot of what we call metaverse native companies that has their core business case within the metaverse space, whether those could be monetization, direct monetization there, or by using some sort of blockchain or NFT technology. So from the public ones, Pixelinks, it's a partner we have been working for already a couple of years, where we are helping them reinvent the music space. It's a company founded by a very famous DJ called Dead Mouse, and he was looking to revolutionize the way that he engaged both on physical spaces as well as digital concerts that became very popular especially during the pandemic. And yeah, we are been working with them on helping on all the different aspects, from production through art, through engineering, in essentially building these components that you require to work on that. Then Globant is already publicly credited in a lot of, as I mentioned, games, or in some cases, games that are also metaverses, or sports could be something like Fortnite. So yeah, from the public cases, I think that, as I mentioned, Pixelinks is a very good example of working with a brand, very new company that is looking to revolutionize some space. And as I mentioned, helping them on a lot of different aspects, from production to backend systems to experience design that likely, as I mentioned, we inherit from game development. A lot of the metaverses are developed with the design in mind, or with some technology that is very similar to game development.
Thank you for that. I keep hearing how you're you're mentioning metaverses, and maybe to take a step back, as my audience know, I have a pretty clear point of view that the metaverse, in its fully realized vision, is really more comparable to, let's say, the internet, right? And essentially it's one kind of massive network of a lot of different things and worlds that are existing inside. Very much like there are no internets, there is an internet one. Because you mentioned metaverses, which is plural, is that sort of how Globant think about the category? You think there are different metaverses, or there will be different metaverses? For example, Roblox could be described as one, maybe Fortnite Creative could be described as another, or are these all sort of metaverse platform that should be part of one big metaverse? I'm curious, what's your point of view and what's sort of Globant's approach to it?
Absolutely. I think that overall, without going into a lot of syntax sugar, we essentially have the same vision. We have this vision of, as I mentioned, this new space. The way we still discuss about metaverses, it's more referred to the subset of partial implementation, as we can say, because there's no realized vision yet. But we essentially have the same perspective. It's one space. That's what could be called metaverse. Now, in syntax, we refer to Roblox and the existing one as proto-metaverses or metaverses, or overall metaverses. Like in the same way we could think about social networks, and we say we have in Twitch, Reddit, and they are social networks, and they are not only one, they are part of this big mesh, as you were describing. So for us, again, the vision is very similar to what you were describing. It's in space. It's a new way of telling. It's a new canvas. It's a new way of connecting with people, as internet was at some moment, with some particularities. Now, typically, again, when we refer to particular implementations, for the lack of evolution still on the platform, we refer to them as, again, metaverse, could be proto-metaverse, but there's a lot of taxonomies we follow, and we have a kind of a benchmark, and we try to guide our partners in terms of what is appropriate for each of these spaces, similar to what we will be recommending many years ago to show social networks. You don't publish the same content on Twitch than on Reddit, than on LinkedIn. The same way you don't approach your metaverse strategy as a brand within Roblox or Fortnite Creative or any particular implementation that you could think. So very similar approach in our side to what you were describing. For us is there's one space, but then there's different implementations and interpretations of what people think and want to do on those space. And that's why you have some similar metaverses with some particular domains or objectives that I would say they pursue, whether intentional or not.
So one thing that I think is interesting and quite challenging, I think, at the moment with brands and clients, from our experience as well at Super Social, is how do you describe or educate the uniqueness of this new category? So, for example, there is a whole subcategory of virtual worlds that are very, let's call them light touch. You come in, there is some 3D world that is created and you roam around, but there isn't really much to do. Maybe you go in and there's something beautiful, but there isn't really a lot to be done. Maybe you shop something for a virtual good, etc. And then you have other virtual world that are essentially feel almost like a different type of a video game in 3D, right? You have engagement, you have gameplay loop and things like that. And I think at the moment, what's interesting is that the virtual worlds that are built with not much going on, they're boring and they're temporary and there's not much happening. There's no quote unquote engagement. But when you need to incorporate engagement, you ultimately land on, there's a lot of mechanics that are almost like resemblance of a video game. And so ultimately what ended up being is, it's a virtual world built as a metaverse experience, but in a way, to a large extent, it's really a video game to some extent. How do you guys deal with that when it comes to the communication and education of partners who are actually not coming from the video game industry, with whom you most likely need to have that additional education that it feels like a video game, but it's not really a video game. But if you want something engaging, there has to be a gameplay loop and, so it's a video game, right? So how do you guys walk around that spectrum and communicating it to clients in a way that they can understand that it may feel like a video game, but it's not a standard video game, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very particular challenge, and we always joke around, the parkour games that you end up seeing in a lot of these, virtual worlds as well. And yeah, for us with clients, we have a specific value offering where we expose our clients to that kind of thing. So you can imagine some sort of like a workshop where we essentially, especially for industries that are not very familiar, we have some educational material, we have talks, and we have essentially what we call Tour del Metaverse, which is we make them create accounts, and we, in some cases, have meetings with them, and we force them to see things through that eyes, because there's another big challenge is that there's a lot of, when you mention the word games, could trigger a lot of different things depending on what is your industry and your background. And for a lot of people, it means kids things. It means, my kids are, quotation, wasting or playing or doing things there. So for us, we try to tackle, as I mentioned, very educational at the beginning and very experiential. I always joke that there's no way I can try to explain you something like that. So we have recording of gameplay, we have recording of previous big events, so that they can at least get a sense of that, and then we try to expose them and guide them. For us, our big pillar in terms of when we discuss with our clients is they need to be conscious. And again, I always point out to a couple of examples of how expensive could be for, if you take a look at Meta earnings call, you can take measurement of how expensive could be to build a platform and build it in a way that it could be the next social revolution and whatnot. So again, for us, it's very simple, exposing them. We have specific offerings. And then a key design value, as I mentioned, is utility. What is really what you're trying to do? If you're trying to acquire new clients, if you're trying to expose, if you're trying to do a training for your employees that foster engagement. So what are those KPIs? What is the utility that they are looking for? So then we follow the next of the steps and we say, we are going to design a, let's say, gamified mechanic that will foster these elements because you want to reinforce this particular objective. So that's whether in some cases they came to us with the idea of doing something in Roblox or the Decentraland, but then they realized that what they are really trying to achieve, the people they want to talk to, they are not on those platforms. So it doesn't make any sense for them to build things like that. So it takes a lot of, discussions with them, and obviously a lot of expectations set, because as they don't have experience on the space, they also don't have experience on the execution of that. And I always mention to them, metaverse projects are not software projects. So don't think about them in a software development manner, process way, because you are going to fail. And failing fast in a project like the metaverse is not the same as failing fast doing a web or doing something else, right? So it's a very challenging space. But yeah, we try to educate them through the process.
And I'm curious, you mentioned that about 1,500 people work in the Metaverse Studio, and kind of from a technology with a lot of different capabilities. How much, and whatever you're open to share, I think it would be interesting for our audience, especially marketers. How have you, I'm assuming that's not a team that was built from scratch over the past 2 years. How are you guys thinking about retraining a workforce that is going to be relevant for this sort of next frontier of the internet?
Absolutely. So the Globant is constantly growing. So hiring, training, retraining has been something that is at the core of our competencies, particularly for gaming and video games, that you need to create these virtual worlds, whether those could be metaverses, games, virtual productions for Disney Plus movies or series. Those profiles, until 5 years or maybe less, there were not big universities. They were not. So on the gaming and interactive experiences world, there was always this process of training people. And we have very strong partnerships with universities, with Unity, with Epic, with all the big players that are required to essentially develop all these training programs and basically skill up a lot of people. The particularities for metaverse is that you require, on one side, let's say interactive developers, so Unity, Unreal, 3D people that can create these virtual spaces. But then you need the artists, and then you need the producers, and then you game designers for all the experiences that you mentioned, and then you need a mesh of a lot of different profiles. For us, as I mentioned, it was a very organic transition because we were working on video games. And as you mentioned, when you want to implement certain aspects of the metaverse, you go to gaming processes, tools, and skills. So for us, it was very natural to focus on continue working on the games we are working, but at the same time, start tackling a lot of these other projects. So we are constantly training. We have custom training programs that we follow. We have internal projects that we have as playgrounds. So we have partial game implementations that people can take, play, experiment, and then we have some feedback sessions. And then we have a very common practice across all Globant, which is called Shadows, which we put people on projects to help on the current execution. So once they go through the training and the academic aspect, then they can be put in a project with some risk consideration. They are not officially part of a project. They are helping someone there, but they are contributing to project activities. But they are, again, mentored and coached by the official team members. So we add more people that is needed to certain specific projects. So the people that is adding extra is being exposed to those particular dynamics of real project in this case. Because we work with a lot of gaming companies and with a lot of brands, whether those could be media or generic or industry agnostic, it gives us the chance to have different complexity level projects, right? So it's not the same to build, as you mentioned, it's a space, you can enter there, you can jump, you can collect things, but it's not the same as a fighting game. It's not the same as a Wizards game, whether you have a lot of visual effects and moving things in the middle. So that's how we typically operate. And we have a lot of additional programs that we can expand in terms of social responsibility and then adding educational institutions to our partner network.
So let's switch gears and talk a bit about platforms. I'm curious, as a start, how much of the work you guys do in this category is building on existing platform versus building things that are potentially more proprietary, especially when you talk about brands, enterprises?
We have a mix of both, actually. It typically depends on the overall strategy. We guide our clients in terms of, as I mentioned, the why they are doing this. So from the why, we derive the what. And then once we have an idea of that, we recommend them to implement things on, let's say, public spaces or proto-existing metaverses. So we help them if they need to do something on Roblox, like Decentraland. We operate in very a dynamic way in that sense as well. So we have a lot of partners, companies that can help us implement in specific ones. When companies are tackling specific use cases, they came to us and they say, I want to do something on the metaverse, but then it ends up being, for instance, could be an onboarding training experience for their own employees that has secret info. So we can't put that on Roblox or the Sandbox or any other platforms like that. So we recommend them to, and we give them the overall perspective and the consequences of those decisions. So we essentially have a lot of mixed projects. We work with existing platforms, but particularly a lot of platforms are also our clients. So we, in some cases, we work with the platform and we may help brands onboard to that specific platform because we are already working with the metaverse provider. It has been our client for many years because, as I mentioned, in some cases, when we see big platforms like Fortnite, Decentraland, the Sandbox, Cray Games, Spatial.io, they have been around for many years. They are not new. They didn't spawn from nowhere when Mark Zuckerberg changed the name. They were already there. And some of them, luckily for us, a lot of them were already...
Why are you ruining the secret?
They were already, and that's why I mentioned, it's like they always came to say, oh no, they are making money right now. It's like, no, they were there like 10 years ago. I'm pretty sure they are still trying to, in some cases, recover the money because the Sandbox, for instance, has a story as a game, even as an iPad 2D game.
Since 2013.
Many years ago. Yeah. So again, a lot of these platforms has been there. We typically approach our clients in terms of what they are trying to achieve. What is the best solution? We are partners and friends with all of them. We know their strengths and weaknesses. So we try to take advantage of that. The big challenge, I would say, and it's something that you probably already saw, is what we are trying to advise to the platform providers is if you want to do activations on Roblox, the Sandbox, the Decentralands, they don't provide the same level of data analytics and insights that will give the peace of mind to some particular clients. And when they compare, I can do this on the Super Bowl and I know how much I'm spending and how much I'm getting. In some cases, it's very challenging, as you mentioned, how we justify the value when there's no maturity on how we are capturing analytics, how we are serving them those analytics. So then they can say, even if I run on an empty space, who was there? What did they do? How can I reach out to them again? Which I saw during last year, a lot of campaigns that pretty much went, I'm pretty sure they went to the hollow. They were pretty cool. You get exposure on your social networks. You did something cool. You get that spike. But then there's no real data that you can collect from that then they can inform their producers, their product owners, their marketing teams to expand and go back to do something else.
Got it. So let's switch gears and talk a bit about what the next 12, 18 months could look like. What are some of the key trends that you guys are keeping an eye on at Globant, and what gets you fired up when you're thinking about those trends and how they could provide you with opportunities to serve clients in really exciting ways?
Absolutely. So what we are seeing in comparison with last year is that a lot of companies are this year taking a little more introspective, view. Instead of being rushing to go to the Decentraland, maybe because of the crypto dip these days, they are not rushing into that, but they are still wanting to think about the space. And they are also putting more emphasis in internal process, which is something that we have been yelling at a lot of them from last year, is that you're focusing too much on selling NFTs to your clients, but you're not trying to give vision to your employees, kind of thing. So it's this year, I think that maybe because of all the shakedown at workforce level, I think that they're seeing a more, I would say, serious approach to that. So that's what I like the most this year, is that I think that companies are being more reasonable on that. The hype is down. Now, all the hype now is on generative AI, so they're going to do all of that on that realm. And now it seems that they are thinking on, okay, now even in some companies are saying, let's not call them metaverse. Let's think about, as I mentioned, this new space, Web3, a more abstract, but a more concrete at the same time. They want to either, as I mentioned, we see a lot of traction on companies wanting to do a better job and the way they onboard, do a better job as the way they connect remote people, which we have a couple of projects working on virtual offices. And there's actually a lot of very interesting findings there that before, again, there was a lot of hype on pre-existing things. And now I see that on the corporate side, what we call enterprise metaverse, I see a lot of very good traction on very good industries like Industry 4.0. We see a lot of that on healthcare, which I think that's what the part that I really like, and I'm really excited to really create experiences that make sense, activating something just because it's hype. So we see a lot of immersive trainings, immersive visualizations for educational, really good comeback to corporate training initiatives, which we also have a couple of partners that are on that particular space on conversational trainings for VR. So we see a lot of traction on that. And I think that's pretty cool that they are, again, shifting gears a little bit more from being just a marketing activation and into, instead of selling NFTs to their clients, now they are asking the real value of smart contracts and how could be used for specific transactions or tracking or things like that. So at Web3, I see that shift this year being something very good and more conservative. They are being pushed by their own finance teams to not overspend a lot. So they're not buying lands in, the Decentraland or any other crypto world. And then they are asking what they can do. They are doing the opposite, which obviously tends to be more productive for everyone.
You've mentioned something really interesting, and I had a lot of conversation about enterprise metaverse, industrial metaverse with folks like Rev Leberedian, who was on my podcast. He's the VP Simulation and Omniverse at NVIDIA.
Omniverse, yeah, indeed. Yeah.
What are some of the things that you believe are really exciting about the metaverse as a category that relates to industry, enterprise? You've mentioned healthcare, which is a really interesting category to think about. Really curious about your point of view on how do you think, what are the most exciting things that could happen over the next few years with those sort of subcategories?
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously, when we refer to metaverse, we specifically are discussing digital twins and some specific use cases that we also have experience. And there's actually a lot of value that we discuss also with our partners in terms of having this digital object that then you can put on a scenario that you control. It actually gives a lot of empowerment to these industries because in some cases they are very risk adverse. In some cases they are facing the challenges of some workforce and not being able to train them or expose them in the same way. So there's a lot of really interesting things that we discuss with them. And from our point of view, we always recommend these clients to have, when you have these digital versions of any product or services, then you can play with different scenarios. And we are working with different projects where we create synthetic environments, whether those could be for visualization or those could be for even training AI on how people behave on open spaces. So there's a lot of leverage there that Industry 4.0, I think that was a little ahead in this sense. They had to develop a lot of simulations and training. But I think what is evolving right now is that a lot of those simulations, training, and even digital twins were very data oriented. They were mathematical simulations. when we add the visual perspective that you can get with the scale of something like Omniverse, it adds a new whole world for analysts, designers, for collaboration, for analytics. So we're, again, super excited. And something that I always point out, there's always a video game that you can take as a data. For industry, we refer to Factorio or Satisfactory, games that has a lot of incredibly amount of complexity, whether again a kid of 11 years could play the game, but a kid of 11 years cannot manage a Tesla factory. But there's a lot of opportunities in that sense to improve the way people learn, make it more engaging, make it easier to learn. But at the same time, it's essentially the holodeck. You can create whatever environment you want. Now, obviously, you need to figure out the economics and the financials, but the way we try to tackle that is, as I mentioned, the big utility. So for clients and companies and brands, if you have a digital version of your product, you can use that digital version for marketing. You can use that digital version for internal training. You can use that digital version for whatever you want. So we are trying to push that kind of value with a lot of brands that so far they're hesitant on jumping directly into some of this. But healthcare, the same way you can visualize the impact of a treatment, the way you can teach patients about particular surgery, or the way you can do the same for doctors. So a lot of really cool opportunities.
That's really exciting. Matías, what's the one thing you want our audience to take away from the conversation today?
I think that the big takeaway will be that there's a lot of really amazing opportunities, but what I will recommend everyone is to find the big why and the purpose and the value, and very importantly, approach these projects. Think about Metaverse projects as a Mandalorian TV series, not as a software project. So that way you can frame it in the right mindset to approach it and take the challenges in the different way, because that's what we still see some industry having some challenges.
I love the Mandalorian analogy. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
All right.
They actually use Unreal Engine. So
exactly.
It's actually a direct.
And we're seeing the enormous impact that game engines is having as a technology enabler, right? Which is really phenomenal. Something that was used primarily for video games, right? Until 5 years ago, is now used to make movies, design cars, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. Even Unreal has HMI display. So there are cards that now runs Unreal in your display. So they are looking for expand a little bit more.
That's pretty epic.
Into more industries for sure.
That's pretty epic. No pun intended. Matías, thank you so much for being with me today. Really enjoyed the conversation today.
Sure. Thank you for reaching out to us. And yeah, if you type metaverse.globant.com, you go to our homepage.
Amazing. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Into the Metaverse. We hope you learned a lot and explored new aspects of the metaverse.